On Berkshire Mountain there did dwell an artist man named Norman Rockwell, I.L.
Stockbridge, that's a small town in western Massachusetts. It's in an area called Berkshire County. A pretty kind of place. Used to be a bit isolated, surrounded by hills and mountains. Not big like the Alps, maybe, or our Rockies, but big enough to discourage traveling in the old days. Going west from Boston, you had to head over the passes on the old Mohawk Trail. Then you got into an area maybe 20 miles wide and 50 miles long. Like a lot of New England towns, there are the traditional white houses and neat gardens and picket fences. That's the oldest house. Then there are the churches. And the town hall. The country around Stockbridge has forests and farms. Water in good supply. They tell me it's much like the lake country in England, including the writers to go along with the scenery. Herman Melville, author of Moby Dick, lived here. In the summertime, the quiet of the town changes to a bustle of summer visitors who come to enjoy the countryside, the theater, the ballet at Jacob's Pillow, and of course the concerts at Tanglewood where the Boston Symphony plays. But most of the time, the village life flows like the quiet stretches of the Housatonic River, an Indian name meaning beyond the mountain place. I'm Tom Glazer in the boat over there, on my way to visit a friend who lives near the river.
His name's Norman Rockwell, and I guess he's just about the best-known illustrator in America today. Much of his reputation comes from the many covers he painted for the Saturday Evening Post, one of America's largest magazines, read by over 30 million people each week. You can find a copy in just about every corner of the United States. Even people who don't read the magazine are familiar with the covers. Rockwell has a special meaning to his large and affectionate audience, and what he paints represents the everyday hopes, the loves, the ideals, the fads of people all over the country. He holds a mirror of kindness and humor up to people who respond with love and affection, what they are, what they would like to be.
He draws and paints in Stockbridge town, and his work has brought him great renown. I am to Rudy New, to Rudy Nay, to Rudy New, to Rudy Nay.
This is a self-caricature of the artist as a young man. We will take a look at him now at his house in Stockbridge. Rockwell works in the barn that he made into a studio.
In this building, Norman Rockwell paints his scenes of small town and country life. I wanted to find out about this man, what makes him tick, how he works, why he works. We're not so different, really. I earn my living as a folk singer, and Norman earns his as, well, not a folk painter exactly, but maybe you might say a painter of folk. We saw each other and said hello. Norman's pretty spry. And after we said hello, he came down and helped me beach the boat. Well, we walked to the house. Norman asked me about the song I was singing. It's called Berkshire Mountain, originally Springfield Mountain. It was written long ago by a fellow named Nathan Jory, who lived a few miles north of Stockbridge. The peasant bard of Hinsdale, he was then called. This is the room you really like to live in, isn't it, Norman?
Yeah, well, I'm not working. I'm in here quite a lot, Tom.
Mm-hmm. It's a very nice room.
Yeah, I
I can see why Bruegel appeals to you. He liked to paint ordinary people, too, same as you do.
Yeah, I'm very fond of Bruegel. He's one of my favorite of the great painters. I call this Saturday night, you know. Maybe you can't see it very well, but it's they're going to a square dance, to my mind, you know.
I can see it very well. It does look like Saturday night.
Good old Vermont.
Bruegel was one of the great painters of all time, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah, he was a great painter. One of the fine arts painters.
Mm-hmm.
See, I'm not a fine arts painter. I'm an illustrator. I illustrate stories, do magazine covers. This is quite different from a painter.
That's a very important point with you, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Well, that doesn't make you any less serious, though, about your work than a fine arts painter, does it?
I think I work as hard as Bruegel worked, but it doesn't come out fine arts. It comes out illustration, you know.
Speaking about seriousness, Norman, I recall that somebody told me, is this true, that back at school, at art school, you were called the deacon?
Yeah, because I was, you know, our school's full of a lot of, you know, gay birds, and I was a kind of a serious guy, and they called me the deacon.
So you deserved the title, huh?
Yeah, I earned it.
That was the golden age of illustrators, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was the great age. See, there was
some of
Howard
those?
Pyle, Edwin Austin Abbey, Remington, Gibson. These were the great illustrators.
Of course, we were talking about the golden age of illustration, meaning mostly books. Before then, though, illustrators were also used as reporters and chroniclers of their times in newspapers and other periodicals. You take Currier and Ives as good an example as any. They were lithographers as well as artists and employed many artists. From about 1825 or so, a stream of prints came out of their shop.
He was handed up his orders at Monroe, Virginia, saying, Steve, you're way behind time. This is not 36, but old 97. You must get her into Spencer on time. Steve, he turned to his old black fireman, said, shovel on more coal. For whenever we hit that old white mountain, you can see old 97 roll.
I bet I've done a lot more pictures than even Currier and Ives ever did.
I don't doubt it. But I wouldn't say there was much similarity between your work and Currier and Ives.
No, I guess you're right. I was influenced by Howard Pyle and Frederick Remington.
I knew about Pyle's influence, Norman, but I didn't know about Remington's.
Well, of course, Remington's work was certainly different from mine, but I liked his approach, how he went about making a picture. In fact, I have a Remington in the other room. Would you like to see it?
I'd like to very much.
Well, come on, let's go.
Okay. So we took a look at the picture in the parlor. Remington was a guy who was born in New York State and moved out west as a tourist, you might say. He didn't paint the boredom of cowboy life, but only the romantic side. And in the same way, Norman, who was born in New York City, became a tourist in the country.
I ride an old paint, I lead an old dam. I'm a-going to Montana to throw the hooly hands. Feed them in the coulees and water in the draw. Their backs are all matted and covered with straw. Ride around little dogies, ride around them slow, for the fiery and the snuffy are raring to go.
The big influence in Norman's life was Pyle, Howard Pyle. He felt fortunate, very fortunate, to have acquired an original, which he hung in his studio.
There were 3 brothers in merry Scotland. In merry Scotland there were 3. And they did cast lots which of them should go, should go, should go, and turn robber all on the salt sea. The lot it fell upon Henry Martin, the youngest of all the 3, that he should turn robber all on the salt sea, the salt sea, the salt sea, for to maintain his 2 brothers and he. With broadside and at it they went, for fully 2 hours or 3, till Henry Martin gave to her the death shot, the death shot, the death shot, and straight to the bottom went she.
You know, Tom, the thing that I admired most, I think, about Howard Pyle was his honest and intense interest in research. Everything he did, he researched. He knew exactly what he was doing.
Have you done the same sort of thing with your illustrations, too, occasionally?
Well, I try to. I'm not the great artist that Howard Pyle was, but,
Well,
for instance, in this Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer, I went out to Hannibal, Missouri, where the story was laid, where Mark Twain himself was a young boy. And I found out there that, you see this picture here. In reading the story, it tells how he stepped out of the window and onto the drain pipe, and then took 2 running steps on the woodshed, and then dropped onto the fence. Well, if you go out there, if you go into that room, which actually exists, you'll find you can do exactly what he said in the book. In other words, it was completely autobiographical.
There's something else I've always been curious about. The clothes and period piece illustrations always interest me. Do you actually get the authentic clothes, too, that they wear at the particular time that the illustration illustrates?
Well, you do if you can, because it's pretty hard to get a hold of George Washington's hat. But
Did you in this case?
In Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer, out there in Hannibal, I did get the clothes that must have been the same kind of clothes they wore at that time.
I see.
I have this old hat here. It's a real beauty.
Well, I'll be darned.
I mean, you can't get a new hat and
a new
make
old
it
hat.
look old. You've got to really, it has to be sweated in and lived in. And this has been lived in.
Well, that hat is so old and so beat up that it looks beautiful.
Yeah, it has a beauty. Yes, indeed.
The way Norman found the models for his covers interested me very much, especially the cover that he did for the Saturday Evening Post, now known as the Golden Rule cover. There were a lot of people in that one, over 30 heads, all kinds of people and nationalities. Where did they come from, Norman?
Well, some of them came from Stockbridge, right here in Stockbridge, and others came from Arlington, Vermont.
Let's start at the beginning. What made you decide to do the picture, Norman?
Well, Tom, I realized that the Golden Rule was the only common denominator of all religions from the very beginning of time. You know, the Golden Rule, which says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Those colorful costumes in the picture, Norman, where did they come from?
Well, I took a trip around the world and brought back literally boxes of photographs. I also brought back some of the actual costumes.
Others as you'd have them do unto you. All men are brothers. This above all must be true. Love your neighbors. Help each other, and then the peace we have longed for will come to all men.
once you had the costumes, I suppose you then found the people to put in them?
Yes.
From around here, Norman?
Well, some were visitors and some were students, such as this fellow. He's part Brazilian, part Hungarian, I think. And there's Choi, Korean. He's a student at present at Ohio State University. Here's a Japanese student. I got her at Bennington College in Vermont. And here's a Jewish student. He was taking summer courses at the Indian Hill School. That's a mile or so from here, just up the road.
How about the ones that live here all year round? Any of those?
Let's see, there's Mr. Lawless. He's a retired postmaster of Stockbridge right here. He made a pretty good rabbi, I think. By the way, in real life, he's a very devout Catholic.
Was that so?
Yeah. Now, you see this group, there's a father and mother and child. They're the Squires family from Arlington, Vermont. He's a Yankee, and she's Swedish. And they've got, I think, 12 kids. I didn't get them all in the picture, but it's quite a family. This little girl here, she's a local girl from Pittsfield, it's about 15 miles from here. And her name is Susie Lee. Oh, this is Chris Schaefer. He's my very good friend and business manager. Boy, was he surprised when he found out he was in the picture. Now, this little girl lives right here in Stockbridge, just down the road. She is a Lebanese originally. Now her parents are U.S. citizens. Well, I got all my Middle East places from Abdullah. He runs the Elm Street Market just one block from my house. I had a wonderful time. Abdullah rounded up 24 Arabs. This little girl is the daughter of Louis Lamoni. He's my brains. Yeah, he helps me around the studio, and he sure would have been mad if I'd left her out of the picture. Now, this one is from memory. That's my wife, Mary, and that's my grandson. Everybody likes to get in the act, so models are no problem.
Do you still have the sketches you made?
Yeah, I have them over here. Would you like to see them?
Sure would.
Well, come on over.
Okay. Would you say, Norman, that the Golden Rule cover is sort of typical of your work?
Well, I guess not exactly typical.
Is it like anything else you've ever done?
Well, the Four Freedoms that I did. You see, whenever there's a big idea that I'm trying to portray, I always use plain, everyday people to express the idea.
I see.
Well, in most of my work, however, I try to do everyday situations. But I try for more than just humor. Pure gags, they're no good. They're soon forgotten. You have to have a little pathos or a little depth in them. Take this cover, for instance. The idea of an old man with a violin looking at a saxophone with a sign, "Jazz it up with a sax." Well, that's supposed to be comic. But the overtones of whether you should stick to the old ways, to the violin, or take up the new ways, the saxophone, that's really a problem, and that's what I mean.
You like to paint old people?
Yes, old men show their lives in their faces. You know, the ups and downs, the sadness, the gladness, everything that happens to them is right there in their face. My favorite old model years ago was a wonderful character named James K. Van Brunt. He was only 5'2", exactly the same height as Napoleon. And he had been in every war that he could get into. He was in the Indian War, he was in the Civil War. He tried desperately to get in the First World War. And it was there in his face, you know. He was a heroic little guy.
But you like to paint kids too, don't you?
Oh yes, I like to paint kids because I think people like to go back to their youth again.
Mm-hmm. Norman, since 1916, I think you've painted over more than 300 covers. And in all that time, I suppose the magazine has changed quite a bit, hasn't it?
Oh yes, the magazine has to change like everything else has to change. And I have some of the older covers, if you'd like to see them, real old covers. Would you like to see them?
Before your time?
Oh gosh, way before my time.
Fine.
Oh, there's your very first cover. Tell me the tales that to me were so dear, long, long ago, long, long ago. Sing me the songs I delighted to hear, long, long ago, long ago. Long, long ago, long ago.
Norman did many covers about World War I and World War II, but the ones we all loved most were about homecoming.
Long, long ago, long ago.
Well, that was about it for the day. So I slung my guitar over my shoulder and walked back to the boat.
On Berkshire Mountain there did dwell an artist man named Norman Rockwell, I.L. To Rudy nay, to Rudy new, to Rudy nay, to Rudy new. He lives and paints in Stockbridge town, and his work has brought him great renown. I am to Rudy nay, to Rudy new, to Rudy nay, to Rudy